It's June here in Western New York, and that means all the leaves are on. And it's a great time to make a video showing you how to identify trees, particularly the hardwoods that have leaves on them. One thing that kind of confuses everybody is that when you're talking about hardwoods or softwoods, hardwoods is anything with leaves on it, whether or not their wood is actually hard or not. And a softwood is anything with needles on it, whether or not their wood is actually soft or not. We're filming in Letchworth Park today, and one nice thing about doing a tree identification video here is that Letchworth Park has a great deal of diversity, meaning that just about any species that grows in New York State you can find somewhere here in the park. You can find a lot of species that don't grow in New York State because William Pryor Letchworth did a lot of planting of trees that were given to him or acquired from other parts of the world. It makes it a great place to study trees and learn how to identify the species. This is a red oak tree. This is one of the species that I make a lot of my bread and butter from. It's a very valuable commercial tree. It can get real big and real old. And here in Letchworth Park, if you like going to see big trees, there's big oaks to be seen here in Letchworth. We'll go look for some later. But oak can vary quite a bit in appearance. The bark, like on this one, is fairly smooth. And oak can have very gnarled bark, sort of like alligator skin. And part of that is because red oak is actually a family of trees. There's red oak, scarlet oak, black oak, and pin oak. All are in the red oak family, and they all have fundamental similarities, and they're often sold as the same forest product, the lumber from them. Red oak trees, the bark often gets smoother as you go towards the upper limbs. And most of your oak trees will have a really big, robust crown. It's shade intolerant, so it actually needs a lot of light. And oak can grow pretty fast, and it's the crown of the tree that is the engine of the wood production. Your oak leaves in general have this basic shape to them. They have a leading filament up the middle, and then the kind of arms radiate off from there. Red oak, the leaves aren't always this big, but the difference between red oak and scarlet oak is that a red oak will be kind of more robust like this, and a scarlet oak will be more likely to have kind of skinny arms to the leaf like that. See, same basic scheme to the leaf, just a slightly different form. In a stand with a closed canopy, such as we're in right now, it can be hard to find a young oak growing in the ground, oak seedlings or saplings, because oak acorns cannot they can't germinate in the shade. They need lots of direct sunlight. So I had a hard time finding a leaf that I could reach because all of them were pretty high off the ground. Found this off a branch that a storm blew off. This kind of buoys your spirit to see giant red oak like the ones they have here. Members of the white oak family have the classic oak shape to the leaf, but the fringes are rounded for the white oak as opposed to pointed for members of the red oak family. See, all these leaf fringes are rounded. And to show you a white oak trunk, I found you quite a specimen. Look at this guy, it's close to 4 foot through. White oak bark is more furrowed than that of red oak. At times it's almost like plates on the tree, but it'd be very hard to confuse a white oak for a red oak. Just they have a look to them. and once you see it, there's no mistaking it. The acorns of a white oak are way more palatable to deer and turkey and game animals. I've tasted them. White oak acorns are kind of sweet, whereas red oak acorns are bitter. So for our hunters, this is a more prized tree to have on your land or your hunting land than red oak. This is the black cherry tree. It's got flaky bark that can look kind of purplish at times, and sometimes it can get gum that oozes out of it. This one does. It actually shows that the tree is stressed for some reason, but you don't always get that on black cherry. It's often something of an ugly duckling tree. When it's young, it'll often be crooked and not that impressive to look at. As it gets older, this tree grows really fast. It can straighten out and become a really nice, attractive, impressive looking tree as it gets older. They kind of live fast and die young. They don't get all that old, but they can get pretty big. The leaves of a cherry are vaguely football shaped, and they're very finely toothy along the edges. The twigs are opposite, meaning that they won't be a mirror image of each other. And if you're ever confused about whether the twig you're looking at is a cherry, break it off and then smell the broken end, and it smells like dirt, or like, I hate to say it, like patchouli or something. It just has an unpleasant smell. This is a soft maple, and it's one of those species that can give people fits because it can be hard to tell apart from itself, and it can be hard to tell apart from hard maple. Now, first of all, soft maple goes by several names. Acer rubrum is the scientific name of this. Soft maple can be red maple or silver maple, but the wood is all the same product, the lumber from it. Now you can see this has fairly smooth bark on it, and this is also a soft maple and has rather flaky bark. And the form of the tree can change within the woods, and there's several ways that you can tell them apart, and you just put it all together to decide which species it is. I don't know how well the camera is picking it up, but the bark of a soft maple is fundamentally gray, but if you look at it more closely, you'll usually see almost purplish or greenish undertones to the color of it. Now, as opposed to hard maple, which is usually kind of silvery undertones to the bark. That's one way of telling. Now here's something that may confuse things a bit in identifying soft maple. Can you see on the trunk those parallel lines or sort of gill-like markings? Not every soft maple will have those. You can see the pattern repeats itself to some extent down the trunk of the tree. Not every soft maple will have those gill-like markings on it, but if the tree has gill-like markings on it, it is certainly a soft maple. So one big key in identifying your species is the twig pattern. What we have here is the leading twig, and we have opposite twigs. They grow mirror image of each other. And any tree with an opposite twig pattern is either a maple or an ash or a dogwood. One thing that can confuse this is as the tree grows, one half of the mirror image can break off at some point. The tree keeps growing. And it's also confusing when the limbs are way up high where you can't pull one down and look at it. Here's another one where the other half broke off and it just kept growing. But The minute you see a single mirrored pair of twigs like that, you'll know that it's a maple, an ash, or a dogwood. The leaves of the soft maple tree have that classic Canadian flag look to them. The way that you tell soft maple from a hard maple is that in between the points of your classic maple leaf shape, it'll be toothy. You get these fine teeth, and I'm going to find a hard maple leaf later that'll show it's a smooth line from point to point on a hard maple. Here's another soft maple that has real pronounced gill patterns on it. Again, not every soft maple has this on it, but when you see gill patterns on the tree, it is certainly a soft maple. This is a hard maple tree. As a forester, in making this video, I'm always tempted to look for a terrific sawlog specimen. In this case, this one isn't. It's got the knots, and it's short, stubby. But hard maple goes by several names. It's also sugar maple, because this is the tree you tap to make syrup with. It's also known as rock maple, or even I've heard it called white maple before. It has a look to it. The bark can be confused with soft maple, but it's less likely to flake. The bark is pretty tight to it. It tends to be grayish silver, as opposed to soft maple, which tends to be purplish or greenish version of gray. So with the hard maple, again, we're looking for an opposite twig pattern. You have a leading twig, and the smaller twigs come off opposite each other. So that could only mean that that's in the maple family, ash family, or dogwood family. And again, you can see how often one of the pairs will break off, and you might get fooled by that, but the minute you find any pairing of limbs like that, that's a giveaway. The hard maple leaf has that classic Canadian flag shape to it, but how you tell the difference between hard and soft maple is that when you go from point to point on hard maple, it's a smooth line. If there's any serrations on these fringes, you'll know it's in the soft maple family. Hard maple bark is usually tight, unless this tree is sick. It has silvery gray to it. And it takes a while to develop an eye to tell this right away between hard and soft maple. This is the white ash tree. I'm sorry to say that ash as a species is kind of doomed on the continent because of the emerald ash borer. If you don't have it already in your neighborhood, it's coming to an ash tree near you. Ash wood is real useful because of the tree's tendency to grow very straight. It has an open grain to it like oak, but it's lighter. Ash bark has a very typical pattern. It's a tough pattern to describe, but you know it when you see it. And ash can be confused with tulip poplar, which has a similar bark pattern, but tulip poplar bark is much, much thicker than this. You get the leading branch and then twigs paired opposite each other. So being an opposite twigged tree, this is either an ash, a maple, or a dogwood. Ash have what is called a compound leaf, meaning that the leaf is not one body and has a leading twig up the middle and then pairs of leaves off of that. There's many trees that have compound leaves like this. There's hickory and walnut and sumac, and walnut will have more leaves in a cluster than this. Sumac too. And hickory can look a lot like this, but hickory, the leaves will be, for a hickory, the leaves will be even less the same size than these. Hickory will have like a really big one out here and really small ones back here. Basswood trees have a vaguely heart-shaped leaf. They get pretty big, and any kind of caterpillar loves to chew on these. So by the end of the summer, the crown of the basswood will be full of chewed up basswood leaves. You see how they got a little start on it here. Basswood bark is characterized by long lines that run up and down the tree. When it rains, the bark will turn almost black, and we've had some rain recently, so it's dark right now, but typically basswood bark will be kind of light gray like you can see here. And the fruiting body of a basswood are these strings of little green berries. They're just small and hard, and they're not on yet. So this is a beech tree. There's bigger and more impressive ones than this in the park. What makes this one special is that it is completely devoid of the beech bark disease, beech scale disease. Beech normally has a perfectly smooth trunk like this, and because of the beech scale disease, it's hard to find one that looks like this anymore. We'll find an example of a beech that's infected with beech scale disease later. Beech is not a valuable forest product, has never been a valuable forest product. That doesn't mean that it's not a useful forest product. I love burning the stuff, and so does everybody else who has a wood stove. High BTUs in it. The lumber from it, it doesn't have much grain pattern to it. It's not a particularly pretty wood. It's very, very hard once dry, and as it dries, it changes shape a lot more so than other species I've found in my wood shop. So beech leaves have that football shape. They got the hooks, the serrated edges on them. They have kind of a waxy feel to them. When they turn in the fall, they turn like a light tan, and the leaves tend to stay on throughout much of the winter. So you'll see these tan, dead leaves flapping on the trees all winter. Beech has a huge tendency to stump sprout and root sprout. So you'll often see the understory just covered with beech seedlings coming up, either from old stumps or from the roots, which is why it's something you have to control when you're managing a woodlot for valuable forest products. Most of the beech you find in the woods nowadays is going to look a lot more like this, stricken by the beech bark disease. Without that, the beech would be nice and smooth, but this is what they look like mostly. And in response to getting beech bark disease, beech send out all these root sprouts. All these seedlings you see on the ground are beech that spring up from the roots of the one that I just showed you. They just carpet the ground, and they can quickly take over. And over time you have a forest that's got nothing but beech, and all of it's sick. The beech does give out beech nuts, which is an important mast producer for wild game, but it's not that reliable. It puts out seed only every 5 to 7 years, which means that something like oak, which drops its acorns every 2 or 3 years, is a much better provider for animals in the woods. Members of the aspen family have at least part of the limbs and trunk that is this gleaming bone white. Aspen is often known as poplar or popple. And that includes quaking aspen and big-tooth aspen. This is a quaking aspen here. People sometimes mistake this for birch because paper birch and river birch will be white, but there's nothing flaky about aspen bark. It's smooth and bone white like that. And when the trees get large, the base of the tree is sometimes knobby like an oak. You can sort of see that on this one down near the bottom. But any member of the aspen family, and the upper parts of the tree at least, will just be bone white and smooth like that. And that is the quaking aspen doing as its name implies. The tiniest breeze will set those leaves to trembling. This tree is, I consider it something of a curveball species, because most landowners I work with have never heard of it before. It's a cucumber tree. It's in the magnolia family. It gets its name from the fruiting body. When it first hits the ground, it looks like a little dill pickle, and it quickly falls apart into these petals. But it's a tight little mass that's shaped like a little sandwich pickle. It first hits the ground and then it falls apart quickly. You can tell this looks an awful lot like other species. You can easily confuse it for basswood or something like that. The giveaway are the big football shaped leaves. No other large tree has a leaf quite like that. They're smooth on the edge. They can be different sizes, you know, but you look up in the crown, you see these great big football shaped leaves, and nothing else looks like that. The tulip poplar is so named because they blossom little tulip shaped flowers that unfortunately don't last very long, and you never get to see them because they're way up high in the canopy of the tree. By the time they drop to the ground, they're a bit disheveled. But tulip poplar can grow to be a massive tree. They typically grow really straight and tall and fast. They got this thick bark on them that when they're smaller can be confused with ash bark. The leaf of the tulip poplar has this four-lobed look to it, and nothing else looks quite like that. So that's the big giveaway if you want to confuse a tulip poplar for an ash or something. You have these big four-lobed leaves up in the crown, and I'm awful glad I found this one because all these tulip poplar in this woods, including that one there, the nearest leaf is about 60 feet above my head, so I had to look for one that was kind enough to drop. This is the bark of the bitternut hickory, and this can look fairly different from tree to tree. It has a pattern to it that can be similar to ash, but it's going to be flatter. And whereas ash bark has just a faint amount of sponginess to it, this doesn't. It's very hard and flat. Sometimes bitternut hickory has bark that's almost smooth, but it can still have this pattern kind of in it. Now the leaf of the hickory looks very similar to the leaf of the ash because it's a compound leaf, has 7 members to it, and the difference being how you see how much bigger the tip leaves are from the bottom ones. That's one of the giveaways. Your shagbark hickory couldn't be more self-explanatory. It's got this bark that will peel off in long vertical pieces like that. It has compound leaves like every other hickory, and it does drop hickory nuts, but that bark is the dead giveaway. You won't confuse that for anything else. Your hickory nut comes in a pod that's in 4 quadrants like this, and the quadrants fall apart. It's green when it hits the ground, but that won't be till the end of the summer. and your quadrants come apart and the hard nut is inside. And by this time of year, all those hickory nuts will be either sprouted or browsed by animals, so the pod is all I've got to show you right now. The sycamore starts off flaky at its base, but as you go up the tree, it'll get flaky. The bark will almost fall off in kind of plates that expose a light-colored underbark, and finally at the top of the tree, it's this light-colored smooth limbs. It often, but not always, grows along riverbanks. It likes riverbanks. This one is quite a ways uphill from the river. Its seed is very interesting. It's a round ball that falls off, and the seed, it's about the size of a golf ball, and then it kind of deteriorates away into all these thousands of tiny little filaments. They're interesting to look at, and it's not the right time of year to show you one. I found one of the sycamore flowering bodies, and it's round like this, and I was saying how their seed is this same shape, only much bigger. Sycamore leaves have a vaguely maple-like shape, but they're broader. Yeah, they have the 5 points like a maple does, or same shape, but they're stretched horizontally a bit.